She worked 2 jobs at 66 years old just to survive, until her millionaire son hugged her at a Christmas party and said, "Enjoying the $6,000 a month, Mom?" She went pale. "What money?" she replied. And in that moment, the glamorous room fell silent, and a secret unraveled that would change everything, from stolen fortunes to a betrayal years in the making. What money was her son talking about, and where was it all going? What came next was what no one saw coming. Listen until the end of today's story to find out what happened next, and please do subscribe to our channel. Please also let us know which country you're listening from. On a snowy December night in Upper Arlington, Ohio, the Langstons' mansion shimmered with holiday extravagance. Inside, a Christmas party unfolded that was as polished as the marble floors underfoot. Guests sipped wine beside the 15-foot tree, the air filled with soft jazz and clinking glasses. At the edge of the room stood 66-year-old Margaret Langston, dressed in a navy blue clearance rack gown and worn-out heels. She had just come from her evening shift at the grocery store after spending the morning cleaning offices downtown. Tired but smiling, Margaret tried to blend in with the wealthy crowd, her eyes scanning for her son. Graham Langston, her only child, was now a tech millionaire. Tall, polished, and confident, he stood with a circle of associates, dressed in a suit that likely cost more than Margaret earned in 2 months. She watched him with a quiet mixture of pride and distance. Her boy had made it. But somewhere along the line, they had grown apart. Then he spotted her. Grinning, Graham crossed the room with a tumbler of bourbon in hand and threw an arm around her. "Mom," he said cheerfully, "you look amazing. Hope you're enjoying that $6,000 a month, huh?" Margaret blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "You know, the monthly transfers. Whitney set it up 3 years ago. You've been getting it, right?" Margaret's heart dropped. Her hands trembled. "Graham, I haven't received anything." The music and laughter continued around them, but time stood still. Graham's face turned pale. "What are you talking about? I've been sending it every single month." Margaret looked over his shoulder, and that's when she saw Whitney, her daughter-in-law. Standing by the Christmas tree in her designer dress, she froze mid-bite, a piece of shrimp dangling from her fork. Her eyes locked with Margaret's, and in that instant, the truth spilled across the room like shattered glass. Whitney began choking, not on the shrimp, but on panic. Graham rushed to her side, concerned, but Whitney's eyes stayed locked on Margaret, full of guilt and dread, because she knew the secret was out. Days later, Graham showed up at his mother's modest duplex on Southwood Drive in Columbus, grief and confusion written across his face. In his hands were bank statements and transfer logs, all pointing to an account in Margaret's name. But the address wasn't hers. It was a downtown mailbox rental. "She told me she was helping you manage finances," Graham murmured. "She said you might struggle with online banking." Margaret stared at the documents, tears clouding her vision. For 3 years, Whitney had intercepted every dollar Graham meant to send. Money meant to keep his mother safe and comfortable had paid for luxury spa days, handbags, wine retreats, personal trainers, while Margaret skipped meals and fought arthritis after double shifts. And it got worse. Graham hired Linda Carver, a forensic accountant, to dig deeper. What she found was devastating. Whitney hadn't just siphoned monthly support. She'd also fabricated dozens of emergencies over the years. Fake hospital bills, phantom car repairs, imaginary roof collapses, all under the guise of Margaret's needs. "She's claimed over $230,000 in your mother's name," Linda said. Margaret sat frozen, her world collapsing. While she struggled to afford heating, Whitney bragged in emails to her sister. "The old woman thinks Graham doesn't care. It's perfect. She's too proud to ask for help, and I get to enjoy the benefits." But then came the final blow. Years ago, Margaret's late husband, Thomas Langston, inherited a stretch of wooded land in southeast Ohio near Wayne National Forest. After his death, Margaret couldn't afford the property taxes. She assumed the state had repossessed it. But Linda discovered Whitney had been quietly paying those taxes and surveying the land. "Why?" Margaret asked. "Because the state is building a new highway right through it," Linda replied. "It's valued at over $1.7 million. Margaret nearly fainted. Whitney had been maneuvering to claim the land legally, positioning herself through fake maintenance records and tax payments. "She was planning to steal your legacy," Graham whispered, his voice cracking. Even worse, Whitney had researched Margaret's medical history, studying her life expectancy like an insurance broker calculating a payout. Margaret refused a private meeting. She insisted on a formal legal sit-down at Linda's downtown Columbus office. She arrived in her old navy dress, this time wearing it like armor. Across the table, Whitney looked nothing like the polished hostess from the Christmas party. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, but even now she tried to spin the narrative. I did it to protect Graham. From guilt, she pleaded. Margaret wouldn't have accepted help. Margaret remained calm, her voice steady. You didn't just steal money. You stole years of my son's love. You used his kindness to cut him out of my life. Graham sat beside her, fists clenched. I trusted you, he said quietly, and you turned my mother into a stranger. Margaret stood and delivered her terms. I don't want your money, Graham. I don't want revenge. I want something far more powerful. I want my life back. She would secure her ownership of the land, retire with dignity, and live on her own terms. And she gave Graham a choice: stay with a woman built on lies, or rebuild something real with me, based on respect, not guilt. Whitney's silence said everything. 6 months later, Graham filed for divorce. It was messy. Whitney tried to claim a portion of the land sale, arguing she'd managed the family assets, but Linda dismantled her case with cold precision. The land sold for $1.7 million. After taxes and fees, Margaret bought a peaceful home in Hendersonville, North Carolina, nestled in the Blue Ridge foothills. She retired the very next day. No more setting alarms before sunrise. No more aching feet from standing for 12 hours at a register. No more mopping floors with swollen joints or skipping meals to stretch her paycheck. In their place came something she'd never allowed herself before: peace. Mornings began slowly, with hot coffee on the wraparound porch of her new home nestled in the rolling mist of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The view alone felt like a second chance at life. She took up painting. For once, what she created didn't have to serve a purpose. It only needed to bring her joy. She filled her days with books she'd long meant to read, long walks through the wooded trails behind her home, and quiet evenings beside Elaine Monroe, her widowed neighbor who'd become an unexpected companion. They shared old stories, exchanged recipes, and sometimes sat in comfortable silence as dusk painted the sky. Margaret never sought revenge. Not in the courtroom, not in the papers. She simply told the truth, gently, when asked. A quiet unraveling began. One friend would whisper to another. Questions started to swirl at cocktail parties. Doors that once opened for Whitney began to close. Her name, once spoken with admiration, now carried the faint scent of shame. Margaret never raised her voice. She didn't need to. And as for her relationship with Graham, it transformed. Gone was the awkward guilt. In its place came something richer: late-night calls just to chat, weekend visits filled with laughter, stories from the past they had once avoided. For the first time in years, they weren't mother and son bound by obligation. They were two people who truly liked one another, who chose each other day after day. Graham no longer brought expensive gifts. He brought time, presence, and real questions about how she was doing, how she felt. It was everything Margaret had ever wanted, and nothing Whitney could have ever stolen. She had lost 3 years to silence and betrayal, but now, every sunrise felt like it belonged to her. On a crisp spring morning, Graham arrived at her porch. "Becca says hi," he said, referring to his new girlfriend, a kind nurse named Rebecca. "She's excited to come down next weekend." Margaret smiled. "Tell her pot roast's on the menu." They sat in silence, watching the mountains breathe mist into the valley. Then Graham asked what he often did now. "Do you think Dad would be proud?" Margaret nodded. "He'd be proud that you saw the truth, and that we chose each other, again." Sometimes the greatest betrayal doesn't come with raised voices. It comes in silence, in the spaces where love should have been. But even after years of being forgotten, Margaret reclaimed not only her dignity, but her future. And to those watching, let me ask, if you were in Margaret's place, what would you have done? Please share your honest thoughts and opinions in the comments below, and please do subscribe to our channel. Thank you for listening to Fragile Stories.